Greetings, Starfighters. Filming this a little later than I planned today. That's why the lighting is like this. Anyway, this got dusty. We are on to episode 2 of season 10 of Shameless Cashgrab, and we have a movie that, as I said at the end of the last one, is based on a novel by John le Carre. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, only novel of his I've ever read was The Tailor of Panama, so I really have no comment. I did notice that one of the stars of this movie is Maximilian Schell, who was now I'm second guessing myself. I was pretty sure about that when I started recording, but live everybody. I'm gonna leave this in. YouTube has been kind of, except for the shorts, in terms of non-shorts, has been favoring longer content, so maybe I should start padding these out more. Yeah, I am really sure. Yeah, he had to have been. Yes, okay, yes. He was the villain in The Black Hole, which is a Disney movie that I think is highly underrated. I honestly really like it. And funnily enough, Ernest Borgnine was also in that one, and he was in the previous movie. So, yeah. The Deadly Affair with Maximilian Schell. It looks like he has a fairly minor role in this movie, based on a cursory glance of the plot summary here. Based on a John le Carre novel from 1966. There's someone revving their engine out there. That always annoys me when they do that, but I don't want to do another take. Let's go ahead and jump into The Deadly Affair. Okay, so I have now watched The Deadly Affair from 1967. Plot summary courtesy of Letterboxd. Charles Dobbs is a British secret agent investigating the apparent suicide of Foreign Office official Samuel Fennin. Dobbs suspects that Fennin's wife, Elsa, a survivor of a Nazi Germany extermination camp, might have some clues, but other officials wanted Dobbs to drop the case. So Dobbs hires a retiring inspector, Mendel, to quietly make inquiries. Dobbs isn't at all sure, as there are a number of anomalies that simply can't be explained away. Dobbs is also having trouble at home with his errant wife, whom he very much loves, having frequent affairs. He's also pleased to see an old friend, Dieter Frey, who he recruited after the war. With the assistance of a colleague and a retired policeman, Dobbs tries to piece together just who is the spy and who in fact assassinated Fennin. Sidney Lumet directed this. I did not know that until the day I watched it. The man is a legend. He did 12 Angry Men, Dog Day Afternoon, Network, Serpico. He also did the Albert Finney Murder on the Orient Express, which I know is beloved, but I honestly didn't care for it, but not going to hold that against him. I'm not going to lie. My expectations are a little higher than normal for movies in a Mill Creek set. Hopefully not too high. So, the movie opens with a credit sequence that I probably could get away with showing on YouTube since the nudity is mainly in shadow, but since I don't use full clips anyway, I don't have to risk it. Also, the music in this movie is done by Quincy Jones. Quite the pedigree attached to this movie, though I'm not super impressed with the opening music. It's not bad at all, it just has this sort of, jaunty hold music kind of vibe. We transition from the credits to the movie proper rather abruptly as we join two extremely British gentlemen mid-conversation, with one talking to the other about having to check on an anonymous tip. The one checking is Dobbs, from the summary, and the tip was alleging that the person he was speaking to, quote, still held communist sympathies after having been a member of the Communist Party at Oxford in the 30s. He tells Dobbs that he no longer ascribes to Marxism, but doesn't regret any of the charity work he and his fellow party members did back then, and as the two walk away, we see a mysterious figure, their back turned to us, watching them. We then cut to Dobbs being called in the middle of the night. The person Dobbs was speaking to was the Samuel Fennin from the summary, and he is being informed of the supposed suicide. And much like the summary said, Dobbs is shocked by this and heads to the office. There's a sequence here about his wife and the car, which I already know from the summaries from the back of the DVD case and Letterboxd that this is related to her affairs. Which, as the summary implies, Dobbs seems to know about, and seems more bothered that whoever it was this particular night was someone he knows than that it happened at all. Dobbs arrives at the office, some official speak happens. There's some concern from his supervisors that Dobbs drove Fenton to shoot himself with an overly harsh interrogation, which both Dobbs and the audience know isn't true. A supposed suicide letter is found, and of course the police call it a clear-cut case. Dobbs is told to speak to the widow to possibly fill in any gaps as to why this happened, and Dobbs naturally thinks that's a bad idea, as she likely believes him to be responsible for her husband's death. What strikes me about this scene is just how British it all really is. Everyone apart from Dobbs himself is being incredibly matter-of-fact about everything, even while stating concern about the potential embarrassment this could be for at least two agencies of the government. Based on what I know about British culture, admittedly all second-hand, this is entirely realistic. Dobbs returns home to get what little sleep he can before going to Fennon's widow. We get a little more character stuff about the dynamic with his wife, which... yeah, I'm really not qualified to talk about this kind of thing, but I do feel safe in saying that a 1960s spy thriller set in the UK is not going to have the most nuanced views on open relationships. Especially one this blatantly one-sided. Which doesn't have to be a bad thing, provided everyone is communicating honestly, mind you. But I'm stepping out of my lane here. I haven't been in any kind of sexual or romantic relationship, let alone an open one, so what the fuck do I know? Anyway, Dobbs goes to meet the widow, Elsa, and yeah, one of the two German characters in the movie is named Elsa and the other one is named Dieter. Who knew the J.K. Rowling school of character naming existed in the late 60s? But I want to take a moment to really praise this sequence here. It's almost static, with the only motion for more than a minute being Elsa making tea while Dobbs stands there, hat literally in hand, while the only other sound apart from the tea being made is the rain outside. And in the frame, we can just make out the blood-stained white sheet on the floor. And none of this is boring. It takes skill to do so little on camera in a movie and have it mean so much. The conversation the two have once they begin talking, I'm not sure I could do it justice really, but Elsa, while not even raising her voice, really lays out how little she thinks of what Dobbs had been tasked to do by his superiors, and she's not wrong. And I think deep down Dobbs knows it too. Dobbs eventually makes his way to the police station to meet with Mendel, the inspector from the summary. During their brief interaction, they learn that Fenton had called a service that provides wake-up calls and had scheduled one for the morning after his death. Dobbs, of course, sees this as evidence against a suicide, but his supervisor gives a hypothesis about why that might not be the case that's honestly a real stretch, and Dobbs knows it. Whether the supervisor is part of a cover-up or is merely hoping to avoid potential embarrassment for his office remains to be seen. Okay, I just realized I did not put that in the script. It does look like it was about avoiding potential embarrassment. Dobbs heads home, being followed by someone, though we don't know who yet, and when he enters the house, we finally meet Dieter from the plot summary. And the way he's introduced to the audience just screams he's going to be revealed as a bad guy later. And of course, the scene also makes no effort to hide that he and Dobbs' wife have a thing going on, but Dobbs is oddly oblivious. After reminiscing about working together during the war, Dobbs tells Dieter he plans to continue the investigation into Fennon's death on his own, and Dieter offers to help, finding the prospect much more interesting than the business meetings he's supposed to be in town for, but Dobbs talks him out of it. And it turns out Dobbs was not as oblivious as I thought. I think I'm beginning to see where this is headed. Up to now, I had been wondering about the title of the movie on account as the only connection between anything deadly and anything a fairy was Dobbs himself. This part drags a bit, so I'm going to skim over it here and get back to the investigation part of the movie, which happens in the film itself with an awkward jump cut. That kind of took me out of it. Dobbs finds himself being followed again, but is able to lose the car, who we see is driven by possibly the same mysterious figure who'd been watching him and Fenton at the start of the movie. He goes to see Mendel, who lives in a house that until the camera panned to him, I'd assumed was a pet shop. For real, this dude has a lot of animals. Fish, a bunny, at least one frog, but I digress. Dobbs was able to get the license plate number of the car that was following him, and he and Mendel are able to trace it to a garage owned by a man they eventually find at the local pub. While Mendel interrogates the garage owner, Dobbs discovers that a tire on his car has been slashed, and he also spots the car that had been following them back in the garage, and is attacked and knocked out cold by the driver. The driver attempts to throw Dobbs into the Thames, but is driven off by a homeless man. I'm assuming it's the Thames. I don't actually know how many rivers there are in the UK. We cut to Dobbs, still unconscious, being loaded into an ambulance. Mendel confronts the garage owner, rather violently, and the interrogation scene contains so much British slang I'm not familiar with in a thick accent, and I have no closed captioning on what he's saying, so I am kinda lost here. I am able to suss out that whatever has been going on has actually been going on for 6 months, so it's obviously bigger than just Fenton and Dobbs. We cut to Mendel, Dobbs, and a third person whose name I can't remember at the hospital. There's follow-up on the investigation, where Dobbs speculates about motives. We cut back to the garage owner being killed by the same man who tried to kill Dobbs, and then we're back at the hospital with Dobbs being visited by his wife. And then suddenly a rehearsal for a staging of Macbeth. Okay. We see Mendel in the audience during a close-in shot on the director, so obviously this is plot relevant, though did we really need to see the whole opening of the double toil and trouble scene? Or the actor playing one of the witches complaining about the prop cauldron not bubbling? Why is this here? Anyway, Mendel, who seems to have taken over as the main character at this point, speaks to the woman in charge of props for the play, and we get a hint that Fennon's wife may have been involved in something shady, which, not gonna lie, movie, possibly making a Holocaust survivor part of some evil conspiracy is not a great look, even if her motives are valid. We go to Dobbs and Dieter at a restaurant where they talk about the relationship drama for a bit, and I'm realizing Dieter isn't taking as much of a part in the main plot as I thought he would at first. After some stuff that would come across as boring if I tried to describe it, but I promise is interesting in context happens, Dobbs is able to identify his attacker, a Hungarian who fled to the UK after the revolution there, and I am biting my tongue to keep from going off on tankies right now, you're welcome, and Dobbs, Mendel, and that other agent whose name I just cannot remember, break into his supposed workplace. There they find very little beyond one telephone and 5 typewriters similar to the ones used to write the anonymous letter that denounced Fennon, as well as his suicide note. Typewriters that Dobbs suggests looks as though they were recently inspected. Before they can leave the building, however, they discover the body of the driver who had attacked Dobbs and killed the garage owner on top of the building's elevator car. Dobbs speaks to Elsa once again, and she has no issue with answering Dobbs' questions. Far as she's concerned, both sides of the Cold War are playing a stupid game that got her husband killed. She doesn't like Dobbs and figures all he's going to do is kill whoever killed her husband, and someone working for them will kill him, and the cycle continues. Dobbs, Mendel, and the other agent meet at Dobbs' home, and we learn that Fennon, over the past several months, had only been checking files out at the Foreign Office that were low-level, non-classified stuff that likely would have been in the newspapers in a few days anyway. Dobbs suggests that perhaps Elsa had been the spy all along, and Fennon had stopped bringing home more highly classified documents to cut her off and had written the letter that denounced him as a communist himself. The 3 men arranged to trick Elsa and her handler, codenamed Sontag, into meeting each other and follow her. Spy stuff happens, the Macbeth performance re-enters the picture, as this is where she'll be meeting her contact. And if you guessed her contact was Dieter, you called it. Dobbs does not take this well, but at least he manages to leave the auditorium so as not to disrupt the play with his small breakdown. That would just be rude. Dieter and Elsa realize it was a trick during the play, and the former is able to kill the latter during the show without being noticed with a technique that I am so sure is unrealistic I could just call it the Vulcan death grip and not be far off. Mendel follows Dieter to a houseboat. As he and Dobbs start to approach the boat, Dieter, who spotted Mendel, shoots Mendel, wounding him but not killing him. Dieter realizes it was Dobbs who'd sent the postcard that arranged the fake meeting, and Dobbs realizes that Dieter had used his wife to keep track of him. And honestly, it remains in character that Dobbs is more upset about Dieter having lied to his wife than about him sleeping with her. Points for consistency. When Mendel yelps in pain after falling over while trying to stand up, Dieter reflexively turns towards him and shoots him again, fatally this time, but it gives Dobbs the opening to attack him and knock him to the ground. The two struggle, but Dieter slips on the mud, it's been raining this whole time, and falls into a gap between a large boat and the side of the pier, being crushed to death while Dobbs, one hand still in a cast, tries to pull him up but fails. We get a coda of Dobbs and his wife in Zurich together after Dobbs rejects an offer to return to his old job. The end. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. 1. No narrator, thank goodness. 2. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this movie may have acknowledged that bisexuals exist. Not in the nicest of ways, but still for 1996 when the movie was filmed. 1966, not 1996. What the hell was I thinking? Even that much is more than one would expect. I mean, even now, let's be honest. It's like that joke I saw on Tumblr one time. What's the difference between a unicorn and a bisexual? When you see a unicorn on TV, they call it a unicorn and not a horse that doesn't like labels. 3. There are a few too many close-ups in this movie. Enough to be a knock against it, to be honest. Just got a little uncomfortable there. And 4, speaking of knocks against the movie, the score gets a little too James Bondy for my tastes. Which is not to say it's bad, it's just that if I wanted to hear a James Bond movie score, I'd watch a James Bond movie, or would listen to one of the soundtrack albums for a James Bond movie. Final verdict. You know, on the whole, this movie is honestly pretty good, and most of my issues with it are minor, but honestly, it's kind of difficult for me to heap too much praise on it when the big twist was that a Holocaust survivor had been a spy complicit in multiple murders. The movie is not quite as bad as what I'm saying here implies. In fact, it's probably one of the better movies I've watched for the show this year, this calendar year, 2023, which includes all of Season 9. But still, would I recommend it? Yeah, sure. Just know going in that parts of it are going to make you cringe. I suppose it speaks to Sidney Lumet as a director that even one of his lesser outings still has a lot to offer. Anyway, tune in next time as we reach the halfway point of Season 10 and close out 2023 with a movie from 1968 called Otley, or Otley. I'm only guessing at how it's pronounced right now. I'm sure the movie itself will clear that up. Have fun. Stay safe.